Okay, so you want to buy a safari park. Not a zoo behind glass, a safari park. The kind where you don't walk past an enclosure, you drive your own car through open land while a giraffe puts its head through your sunroof. America's first one opened in 1967 in Loxahatchee, Florida, and it's been letting cars roll through lion territory ever since. Here's the paradox. The exact thing that makes people buy the ticket, an animal that could kill you, walking free 10 feet from your windshield, is the same thing that makes this one of the hardest businesses in America to insure, staff, or even legally own. And as of December 2022, if that animal is a big cat, in most cases you're not allowed to privately own it at all anymore. You've built a business where the star of the show bites, and you're entering an industry nobody actually has a headcount on. Best estimates put somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 tigers in captivity in the United States alone, more than the roughly 3,900 believed to remain in the wild across all of Asia. Only about 6% of those captive tigers live at accredited, inspected zoos. The rest are in backyards, roadside attractions, and parks exactly like the one you're about to buy. Nobody in government can tell you the real number because until recently, nobody was required to count. Let's talk price. On the cheap end, $1 to $3 million, you're not buying predators. You're converting existing ranch land into an open range park, fencing a few hundred acres at roughly $15 to $25 a linear foot for game grade fencing, and stocking it with ungulates, zebra, antelope, ostrich, running $2,000 to $10,000 a head. No lions, no liability nightmare. Also, honestly, no real draw. Step up to $5 to $15 million, and now you're in predator territory. Double fenced containment, moated enclosures, a veterinary staff on payroll, and a USDA Class C exhibitor license, which sounds like the expensive part and isn't. The license fee itself is a sliding scale from about $30 to $300 a year depending on your revenue, plus a $120 one-time application fee. That's it. That's the government's cut for letting you keep a lion. The real number is at the top. In November 2025, Lion Country Safari, the original 1967 park, still running on the same land in Florida, sold for $30 million to the Ellison family, the same family behind Oracle. 58 years of operating history, an existing animal collection, cleared zoning, an active license, and 24 million cumulative visitors baked into the price. That's what a fully de-risked safari park costs. Everything below that price tag, you're building the risk yourself. And the hidden cost nobody puts in the brochure. A single tiger costs about $18,000 a year just in care, roughly $50 a day, before you even count food, which alone can run $10,000 to $200,000 a year depending on quality and volume. An elephant runs $75,000 to $100,000 a year in care. Multiply that by a collection of 40 or 50 animals, and you're carrying a 7-figure feed bill before a single employee gets paid. Now, the rules of the game, what you need before you're allowed to open the gate. Federal Animal Welfare Act licensing, state wildlife permits that vary wildly by state, agricultural or commercial zoning clearance, and a minimum of $1 million in animal liability insurance, which real insurers will happily quote you far higher once they see lion on the species list. Then there's the one that changed the entire industry, the Big Cat Public Safety Act, signed into federal law in December 2022. It bans private possession of lions, tigers, leopards, and other big cats for exhibition, and it bans public contact with cubs, the cub petting sessions that were, for years, the single most profitable thing a small exotic animal park could sell. Existing owners had to register their animals and were grandfathered in, with no breeding allowed. The business model that built the entire Tiger King era is now, simply, illegal to start from scratch. So the paperwork is cheap. What actually gates entry is the capital for a compliant enclosure, the politics of getting your neighbors and your town council to accept lions down the road, and, since 2022, a federal law that decided which animals you're even allowed to touch. Staffing follows the same logic as the license fee. Small on paper, brutal in practice. Inspectors and insurers both expect a keeper to large animal ratio that leaves zero room for a sick day near a predator enclosure, which means you're carrying overtime and backup coverage costs most small businesses never think about. And every one of those keepers needs species-specific training because the Animal Welfare Act inspection that can shut you down doesn't just check the fence, it checks whether the person feeding a tiger actually knows what they're doing. Here's how the money actually works once you're open. Ticket revenue is the floor, not the ceiling. The real number the industry chases is per cap spending, a term borrowed straight from theme parks, meaning how much a visitor spends beyond the gate price. Photo encounters, feeding experiences, VIP behind-the-scenes tours, Gift shop and concessions running the same 60+% margins as any theme park food stand. On the supply side, legal breeding loans through accredited zoo networks still function as a quiet trade in non-restricted species, even after the 2022 law closed that door for big cats specifically. Do the math on scale. Lion Country Safari has hosted roughly 24 million guests across 58 years. Call it 400,000 plus visitors a year at full maturity. At $40 to $50 a ticket before add-ons, that's $16 to $20 million a year in gross admission alone for an established park. Against that, you're paying animal care, a keeper staff size to insurer and USDA requirements, veterinary costs, and maintenance on enclosures that have to survive weather, escape attempts, and inspection. The business only works at volume, which is exactly why the buyer of the category's flagship asset in 2025 was a Billionaire's family office, not a first-time operator. There's a second revenue layer most people never think about: annual passes. Just like theme parks, safari parks push local families toward a season membership instead of a one-time ticket, because a $150 annual pass that gets used 4 times a year locks in recurring revenue and smooths out the slow season. Layer on corporate event rentals, buyout nights, birthday packages, school field trips booked months in advance, and you've built a business that isn't just selling access to animals, it's selling a subscription to them. And on the supply side, there's a quieter economy running underneath all of it. Accredited zoos trade animals through something called a species survival plan, a breeding loan network coordinated by the AZA that moves individual animals between institutions to manage genetics across the whole captive population, officially non-commercial, but it functions as the polite spreadsheet version of buying and selling. It's how a mid-sized park replaces an aging animal without touching the private exotic animal trade that got Joe Exotic in trouble in the first place. The architecture of the system is built entirely around risk separation. Predator and prey zones are physically split by double fencing or water moats, with staff on radio controlling gate sequencing so a car never rolls from the antelope loop into the lion loop with a gate open on both sides at once. Big cats and elephants get night houses, climate-controlled indoor housing they're moved into every evening, which is its own construction and heating cost, especially outside the Sunbelt. And just like a casino floor, the physical route through the park is engineered. The exit from every major exhibit funnels you past the gift shop and the photo booth, because that's where the actual margin lives. Now the cases. On the success side, Lion Country Safari, opened in 1967 as the first drive-through safari park in the country, survived hurricanes, ownership changes, and 6 decades of changing regulation, and exited in November 2025 for $30 million to the Ellison family. It's the closest thing this category has to a proof of concept, not exotic animals, but land, permits, and longevity. On the failure side, 2 very different collapses. First, Joe Exotic, the Greater Wynwood Exotic Animal Park in Oklahoma, 1999 to 2018. Built his fortune on cub petting and merchandise, peaking at an estimated $4 to $5 million net worth around 2014 to 2016. Filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2011. Lost a trademark lawsuit to Carol Baskin worth $1 million, which forced the zoo into seizure. His net worth today is, by most estimates, below zero. And the cub petting engine that funded his entire rise is now federally banned. Second, West Coast Game Park Safari in Bandon, Oregon. Owner Brian Tenney pleaded guilty to 47 criminal charges, 43 of them for animal neglect. Authorities removed 310 animals from the property in one operation. That's not a lawsuit that drains your bank account over years. That's the state walking in and taking your entire inventory in a single day. And a live reminder of the core risk. In 2026, at Safari World in Bangkok, a pack of lions killed a 58-year-old zookeeper who stepped out of his vehicle in the predator zone. Regulatory scrutiny on the park's animal handling intensified immediately. One incident, and the entire wild but safe premise the whole industry sells to visitors gets tested in public. So run the numbers both ways. Optimistic case. You buy an already established, fully permitted park at the Lion Country Safari price point, around $30 million, inheriting the land, the collection, the license, and the visitor base. At 400,000 plus annual guests and $16 to $20 million in gross revenue, after animal care, staffing, and insurance, you could plausibly be looking at a $20 20 to 30% operating margin, a real, if unglamorous business with an 8 to 12-year payback horizon on the acquisition. Realistic case, you build from zero, $10 to $15 million in land, fencing, and enclosures just to open the gate with a modest predator collection. $1 to $2 million a year in animal care for 30 or 40 large animals. 7 figures in insurance. Constant zoning risk from neighbors who don't want lions down the road. And the whole thing can end in a single afternoon, a mauling, a neglect case, an inspector's report, regardless of how many profitable years came before it. Factor in the timeline too. Lion Country Safari took 58 years to go from a founder's idea on undeveloped Florida scrubland to a $30 million exit. Most of that value wasn't animals. Animals depreciate, get sick, die, and have to be replaced. It was the zoning entitlement, the federal license history with 0 major violations, and 6 decades of brand recognition in one media market. Build from scratch today, under a stricter federal framework than existed in 1967, and you're not just competing with other parks, you're competing with 58 years of head start you can't buy back at any price. So here's the paradox, in full. The one thing that makes a safari park special, an animal that could kill you roaming loose past your windshield, is the exact thing that makes it almost impossible to insure, almost impossible to legally expand, and if it's a big cat, since December 2022, almost impossible to even own from scratch. The winners in this category were never the ones with the rarest collection. They're the ones who survived long enough to become the land itself. 58 years, 24 million visitors, one $30 million sale to a family that can absorb the risk like a rounding error. Buy shares in a regular theme park operator instead. The lion still gets fed. You just never have to explain to a jury how it got out.